let's do this. Alright guys, this is it. This is my favorite and least favorite couples that I read about in 2017. Now, this year is gonna be a little bit anticlimactic, honestly, because when I was making my list, I realized that I had a real shit reading year for 2017. I just didn't have the kind of gushing couples that I usually have, but I also didn't have the couples that I completely hated. Many couples on this list are couples that I feel neutral or nothing about, or forgot about throughout the year. And that's not a fun way to live as someone who has a shipper heart. My heart contains multitudes of ships. And in 2017, it was not properly fed. So I'm a tad bit upset about that. If you guys want to see my other ships from other media that I can do on my other channel, I will do that, because it wasn't a bad shipping year overall. There were things that gave me feelings. It just wasn't in books as much this year. So if you're new to this for the past few years now, this has been one of my crowning achievements of my channel, talking about all the couples that I read about each year. But I have about 40 couples on this list, and I do talk about canon couples. There's a few exceptions because it's kind of like couples I feel like are going in the canon direction, and mostly they are the main couples, not side couples. Again, I have a few exceptions. It's my channel and I make the rules. But I have 40 on here that were canon couples that I read about this year. So let's get into it. We'll start with the bottom and go to the top. So my least favorite couple of the year was David and Meg from The Sculptor. Now this is a graphic novel, and the reason I hated them so much is because Meg is a manic pixie dream girl. If you do not know that term, look it up. Google it. There's stuff all about it. It's a very big media trope and term. And because of that, their relationship had zero substance. She was used as a plot device for him and for the motivation of his character, and he was overall kind of a shitty character and kind of a shitty human and just a very stereotypical dude. I kept waiting to feel the feelings for the couple, and I never did. I just felt mad. Then we have Princess Amrita and whoever the heck she was with in The Library of Fates by Aditi Khurana. I've gotten rid of the book, so I can't even tell you, and I tried to Google it, but it's not a popular enough book that people are really talking about the characters and stuff online, so I don't even know. But there's sort of two dudes. There's a guy that she was best friends with in the beginning that, like, loves her, and then there's a guy later on who, like, The book is so forgettable, number one, and number two, the characters are honestly so forgettable that I'm forgetting what their names even were, and it was just like unbelievable. These characters were so bland, and there was actually a trope in there that I typically really like, and even that couldn't pull me in. It failed on so many levels. Then we have Scarlett and Julia from Caraval. Man, was this book awful. So if you guys haven't kind of picked up on it, this kind of also encompasses my disappointing reads of the year, because you can tell from the ships that I hate, the books that I also really didn't like. Caraval is right up there on the top of that list. Because this couple and everything, they don't make sense. They don't make sense. She's being led to this dark, mysterious place by this dude that she doesn't know, and they kind of like hate each other, but the second his shirt comes off, she's like, oh, he's dripping and wet, and it's like, who fucking cares? It's so, I mean, there could be more examples that I would have, but honestly, my brain has gotten rid of so much of this book because I could not care less. And I still am seeing hype for the next book in the series, and I'm like, makes you happy, that's fantastic. It made me nauseated. Then we have Kel and Lila from A Gathering of Shadows by V.E. Schwab. I have so many problems with Lila as a character, that's probably what this stems from, but in addition to me just hating her as a character because she honestly has monologues where she says, I'm not like other girls, more than once. More than once. Beyond that, I do not understand their relationship or their pull to one another, because they're not technically together, but like they want to be, and they like, again, like love each other. Why? Why is this like at all romantic or anything? Why? I actually like Kel as a character overall, I just really hate Lila, but this couple I didn't put on the list because I forgot until just this moment, but Alucard and Reese? Rye. I think it's Rye. I really liked them, but they aren't really canon in that book either. That's probably why I didn't mention them. But I like all of those side characters and like their dynamics way more than the protagonists, which is a problem. Then we have Iona and Kygo, I think, from Eon by Alison Goodman, and this book was one of my least favorite books of all time. But this couple isn't quite on the bottom of the list because the book doesn't really revolve around them as a couple, and I'm pretty sure this is the character's name. Again, I had to Google it because I forgot what the guy's name was. But he's like a prince. He sort of is like, there's elements of like sort of the Mulan type story in here. So this is like basically the equivalent of the prince, except for the prince in Mulan is so much better in all ways. But this dude is just like, again, forgettable, and they don't really have much of a dynamic anyway. But there's like sort of something going on there a little bit. I honestly don't remember a ton because with like many of these on the list, they're so forgettable and I so don't care. This one actually kind of makes me sad, and it's Ersal and Ragna from The Seafarer's Kiss by Julia Ember. They are a ladies loving ladies couple, and I wanted to like them so much, and I kind of liked them in the first part of the book, but then the second part of the book, there's this like passage of time thing that isn't really well done in the book, so you don't really know how much time has passed because it sort of feels like a lot of time to the characters, but when you're reading it, it doesn't really feel like a lot of time, and it's also like, why do you guys like love each other when you don't really know each other at all? And then there's this whole element of borderline abusive behavior that happens. The characters end up hitting each other later on in the story when they're like reunited, and it's like, no. And I think Julia Ember has made some edits to the book. I'm not sure if she edited that abusive part, but there were some problems also with there's a non-binary character who has some issues with the rep in there. But the narrative doesn't say anything about the hitting is bad. It's sort of looked at in this like, it's okay that we did that, and like, I deserve to be hit, and like, we deserve to hit each other, and we're all just fiery, we have this fiery passion. It's like, no. And I feel like it would have had a lot more outrage as well if it was a male and a female character, but because it was two female characters, it was like allowed. And it's like, it doesn't matter the genders of anybody in a relationship. If you're hitting each other, it's a problem. Then we have Thane and Ciena from The Lost Stars. They just fall victim to the fact that they're boring. And they just happen to fall victim to a trope that I don't like, which is like childhood friends falling in love, which I know a lot of people really like, so maybe you'd really like this, but this book is just really boring. Like, nothing really great happens because the characters are really bland, and I had to look up their names because I couldn't remember either one of their names, and I didn't read this that long ago in the year, and I just completely forgot their names. Like, they're just bland, boring, and also just predictable because you know that the story isn't going to be written about characters that don't like, and it's just, so there should be like this angst because they're on opposite sides of the like war for a lot of this, but like, there's none because the characters are so bland. Then we have Clara and Nicolas from Winter Spell by Claire Legrand. Now this is a book that I've recently done a review on, so you can go and check out my more in-depth thoughts there. But the problem with this is that it's sort of ridiculous. So Nicolas is a statue, or he was a statue. He's like the Nutcracker character because this is a sort of Nutcracker very loosely based on the Nutcracker retelling kind of thing. So he's a statue, and Clara's like known him her whole life because he's been a statue. I mean, he's been a statue, but he's been the statue that she's been drawn to since she was a little girl, which is like kind of creepy. And she's always like talked to it and like tried to dance with it and like kissed it and whatever. And of course he comes alive. And in the narrative it's kind of explained away like it's fine because he was a guy the whole time, and like, so it's not weird that you did that and that you had like these weird like, this book has problems with like sexuality and the way that it depicts sexuality as a negative thing because the main character kind of thinks of it as negative because she's dealing with some like abusive men in her life. So it makes sense, but it's also like the obsession with, there's a lot of lines of like her feeling her dress between her thighs and all this stuff. It's just like, why are we doing this? But that just lends to why the relationship was so weird. So there's that. And then so he's been alive in the statue the whole time, and he like knows her. So they have this like connection. It's almost like they've been together even though they haven't been together, and they don't actually know each other because he was never able to speak, right? So they have this whole thing and this whole like fated thing and this whole like chemistry, and it should feel like angsty and great and wonderful, and it doesn't because it's weird. It's just really weird how it's done, and a lot of things about this book that were weird were like the way that the sexuality is handled in general, which just makes it really uncomfortable. On the other hand, and again, a couple I didn't technically mention in here because they're not canon, but Clara has a chemistry as well with the villain in here who's a lady, and they would be pretty high up on this list, like middle high on this list, because there were some problems that are like problematic, as all like villain relationships tend to be. But they have like a thing that I like really liked, and it was like really like, ooh, that's all, I like when the protagonist and the villains like have feelings for one another. So that was great, but like the couple that you're supposed to root for was not great, because it was weird. And the fact that the weird couple is the protagonist couple, like the main couple, and not like the villain couple, that's not supposed to happen. The next couple is Skyler and Josh from I'll Meet You There by Heather Demetrios, and this is because Josh as a love interest is not my cup of tea. I didn't hate them completely, but he's this military guy and they live in a small town, and he has this very stereotypical military small town way of talking. He uses homophobic slurs. I believe there's racial slurs. If they're not used by him, they're used by people around him, and he kind of condones it. And it's just like, it's this borderline hickish behavior like you would see in like a stereotypical sense. And in a way, I guess that's realistic, but it's just not good, and it makes me not root for the couple because I feel like he's a bit of a sleazebag. And she doesn't really correct his behavior either. So while there were times that I wanted to root for them, I couldn't because she's not correcting his behavior. There's a couple times where she's like, stop it, don't say that. But other than that, like, no one in the narrative doesn't really do anything to repair that. So it was just a couple that left me like, I can't root for this because you're kind of a douche. Then we have Quoth and Denna, or whatever her real name is, from The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Now, I really love this book, and this does not speak poorly of the book, but this couple is just, like, it, at this point, isn't fully formed, and there's just issues with it, and it's not like, I don't really necessarily think you're supposed to romanticize this couple. I don't think this couple is supposed to be a couple that you're supposed to want to be like, or anything like that. I don't think that Denna is supposed to be a character that you're supposed to idealize, but he idealizes her. Quoth thinks she's amazing. Quoth loves her. Quoth, like, wants to be with her. He's fascinated by her, and that's interesting. But them as a relationship, sort of, or as, like, trying to be a relationship, or him pining after her, like, I just don't like their dynamic. I don't feel the way that Quoth feels, and I want to feel the way Quoth feels, and I don't think we necessarily are supposed to feel that way, but I want to. Like, I want to be pining with him, and, like, feeling those angsty feelings, and I'm not, because I'm just like, I don't hate her. I like her, like, as her own character, and a lot of people don't like Denna, and they just think she's awful and whatever, and she's mean to him, and like, I don't care about that. I just, like, I don't care about them together. I care about them kind of separately as separate characters. So there's not a couple that really draws me in any way. The next couple is Lyra and Will from the His Dark Materials series, which I finished up this year. So I read the last 2 books that included them in them. And I know this is going to hurt a lot of people's hearts because I know that this series is just like so well loved by so many people, but I just don't ship them. I like them as friends, but as soon as it started being like romantic leaning, I was just like, oh God, I don't like this. And I think it's just because I don't like kid relationships. They're like 13 to 15, I think, maybe. No, they're young. They're still like 13 when the series ends, I'm pretty sure. I listened to an audiobook, so it's a little hazy, but they're young. They're 13, possibly younger, and when they start being romantic and like falling in love, I'm just like, you're babies. You're little, and I don't like it. I've talked about this with other couples and like TV and stuff recently. I actually talked about it in my discussion of Stranger Things on my other channel, so I will link that down below if you guys are interested. But I just don't like when couples that are young are really like romanticized and or sexualized, and there is the implication in the last book that Will and Lyra may have had sex. You're small, you're little kids. I don't like it. I don't like it. And I know what happens. Like, I know in the world that lots of children end up in sexual situations or whatever, or like teens, you know, or like preteens or whatever. Like, I completely know that happens, but I just don't like it. I don't like it being in media, and I don't like it being portrayed as okay in media. I just, yeah. So while I like the characters and I like their friendship, I don't like their romantic relationship. The next couple is Melanie and Jared from The Host. Now, The Host will return later on in the list, but this is the first couple I want to talk about. And again, I don't hate them necessarily, but I just don't like them a ton. And I think it's because I don't like Jared a ton, because some of the problems I have with The Host are in its, like, ownership of female bodies is, like, how it's portrayed. So Melanie and Wanda, or Wanderer, share a body. And a lot of times it's being talked about like this body belongs to Jared. Because Jared was in a relationship with Melanie. And it's just like, I don't care if they're in a relationship, it doesn't belong to him. You know? And he says it, and the main characters say it, like, all of them say it at some point. It's just like, I really don't like that. And then there is a really big age difference, and that's a problem with the couples in general, this, like, weird age difference thing. So he's, like, 20-something when she was, like, I think they met when she was maybe 16 or 17 or something. It's very borderline and very hazy. And it's like, why do you have to make him that much older? Why couldn't he have been like 19 or 20? Like, if you wanted an age difference, why couldn't it have just been a couple of years? Like, why does it have to be like this adult going after a teenager? I don't get it. I don't like it. I know it's the end of the world, but I just don't, no. So yeah, them as a couple just kind of, I don't pull for it as much. Nah. The next couple is Fitz and the girl he likes in the town from The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I didn't specifically look this girl's name up because I didn't want to be spoiled for later books in the series, and I didn't want to flip through this entire book. And, you know, it's laziness. We have 40 couples to get through. It's a lot. So they were just not a main couple. This is a book that takes place when he is mostly a child through, like, mid-teens, so it's just like the establishing of them as maybe like him having a crush on her, her having a crush on him, so it's just not anything to really sink your teeth into. The main point of the story isn't a romance at all, and they're just kind of briefly mentioned. I think it'll be interesting to see if they do end up evolving into something later on as the characters grow older, because I know that this character of Fitz gets followed through many, many books into adulthood, later adulthood possibly, so it'll be interesting to see if she rolls back around and if she's like a main thing. I think she will be just because of how it was set up. But it's just, there's really nothing right now. Then we have Linna and Andreas, I think was his name, from Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys. Now, I listened to this on audio and I didn't like this book because of the audiobook narrator. It was just not narrated very well, and I think that led me to... So now we are entering the middle part of the list, which is just the part where I feel meh about most of these couples, and honestly that's been the majority of this list, even the couples towards the end. Do you guys know how hard it is to film videos like this when you just feel meh about all of them? Like, I want to be passionate either way, and I'm not, because so many couples this year were just like bland and forgettable. Hurts me. So number 27 on the list is Natasha and Daniel from The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. This is a book I listened to on audio as well, and I really liked the book overall, but I just really can't get behind the meet and fall in love implication within one day and like soulmates within one day. Like, I just don't like it. So although like overall they were okay, it's just like, I don't want to hear you guys talking about like soulmates and fated and stuff within one day. Like, I'm okay with all those kinds of tropes, like soulmate tropes and fated, and I can be a romantic, I can get into that, but like in one day, you guys don't know each other, and I feel like it's just heightened because of this like one day gimmick that is being thrown into so many contemporary books. So I don't like that. It's just like, are you feeling this way because you are going to be like separated, or you just have this one, like, I can't really believe it when I feel like it's just based on like hormones, which I know most couples are kind of just based on hormones, but like, I just feel it that much more in these like YA contemporary books where it's just like, oh, you guys love each other? Oh, really? On that same theme, we have Matteo and Rufus from They Both Die at the End from Adam Silvera. Same thing. Same exact thing. They meet in a day and they are like in love, and it's just like, but I don't think you are. I think it's just this whole like, you only have this day. I don't believe it. So I can't really like it because I don't really believe it. Like, and in both of these books, it's just like, oh, if we would have had more time, then definitely. But like, do you know that? Because I think it's this weird situation that's making all these feelings so heightened. And I guess some people will be like, it makes it more true, but I don't like it. I just don't like it. It's not a thing for me. Then we have Star and Chris from The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, and this isn't because they are a like bad couple, it's just the book was not about that at all. Like, there was a few times that their relationship came into play and whatever, but you don't get to see like a ton of them. They're generally like a good couple together, they're supportive, they have fights and they talk them out, and it's like, it's good, but it's just like, the book was not about that. Like, the book was not about a romance. They had an existing relationship. It was fine. They end up talking about a lot of things that were important to the book and the themes of the book within their relationship, but like, they're just meh. I'm interested to see how their relationship will be depicted in the movie. I hope it doesn't take more time than it needs to, because it's just so not about that. But yeah, they're just kind of like middle of the road. Just kind of like, all right, they're fine, but I don't feel any kind of way about them, and I'm not going to remember them as part of the book. Like, their relationship is not the parts of the book I'm going to remember, and I actually had forgotten his name, and I literally just listened to it, because these forgettable, just whatever, couples, my brain doesn't hold on to those. There's other things ship-related that my brain wants to hold on to. On a similar note, Simon and Blue from Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda. This was a book that I liked but didn't love. I am interested to see the movie because I just tend to like contemporary YA movies more than their book counterparts. So I think that I'll probably like them a little more in movie form. But it's just a book that I found fairly forgettable. I listened to it on audio. It was cute, but it just wasn't anything that like felt different to me at all. So I think that's why I like them as a couple. Is just like, yeah, they're cute. They're fine. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Then we have Darrow and Mustang from the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. This is mostly because they're not really together a ton. They have this like romantic tension type thing. They're sort of like an on again, off again. There's things in the world keeping them apart, and there's secrets that they both have, and that kind of like miscommunication stuff. And again, the book is just really not about the romance like at all. And Darrow has other things on his mind all the time. So, like, while I think I would like their dynamic a lot if it was able to actually play out in a significant way, I don't even think these books have time for that. I don't know if Morningstar will have some more of that. Maybe they'll eventually kind of work out their stuff and be together for a substantial enough time that I think that it would be interesting. I don't know. They were together a little more in the first book, so they have like a teamwork dynamic that I really like, and that's why they're higher up on the list. But it's just, they don't really have a lot that you can, again, sink your teeth into because they're not really together a lot of the time. Then we have Gloria and Vikram from A Crown of Wishes by Roshni Chokshi. Now, these guys just end up paling in comparison, in my opinion, to another couple that I really love from Roshni Chokshi, which is the couple from A Star Touched Queen that I talked about last year. So they're more, the couple from last year are more like Hades Persephone-esque, and these two just can't compete with that kind of level, you know? But they're, again, a couple that's kind of thrown together and that they both have to complete a quest that's in a similar kind of path. So they end up being reluctant teammates turned to friends, turned to a little more. And it happens in such a short amount of time that while I kind of like the dynamic, it's just not one that really like stuck with me. It was fine when I was reading it and I ended up like kind of pulling for them, but it wasn't something that was like, oh my gosh, I felt for them. Like, I just didn't, because things were happening so fast, and again, it just wasn't the main focus of the story in any way, and it just wasn't a kind of dynamic that I found different or that really like stuck with me. It was just like, okay, yeah, they're thrown together in this thing. They hate each other right now. They're probably gonna like each other later. And there wasn't enough angst to keep me going, you know? Then we have Miel and Sam from When the Moon Was Ours by Anna Marie McLemore, and this is a wonderful, beautiful magical realism story. And I liked them as a couple. They're actually one of the couples that does follow the trope of like best friends, childhood best friends that are now in love with each other kind of thing. I really liked that. And they're very cute and very like very, very sweet, and I like them, but the cute and sweet isn't what I tend to go for, as you guys know. So it wasn't their fault that they're higher on the list. They're pretty high for being cute and sweet, honestly. And that shows you how much I really did like them as a couple. But again, the things that I remember about the story aren't necessarily about their relationship. They do explore a lot of the themes of the story within their relationship, and they end up having conversations about that and about identity. There's a lot of stuff about identity in here that they end up talking to each other about, because it's like, well, how can you be in love with somebody and not know all of them, or so they're keeping parts of themselves from you and stuff, and I really liked those discussions. But overall, those discussions were had like throughout the story, and it wasn't just within their relationship. But for being very cute and for being best friends in love, I liked it, and they are higher on the list for that reason. Now we're breaking into the top 20. So for number 20, we have Marin and Mabel from We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. These are two female best friends who formerly had a romantic relationship, and they are kind of figuring out what happened and what tore them apart throughout the story. And I felt a lot of feelings and a lot of sad feelings for them in my heart as everything was kind of unfolding at the beginning of the story. You have the main character being away at school and not wanting to see her best friend, and there it be revealed that they were romantically involved, and things kind of fell apart, not because of their relationship, but because of outside external factors having to do with the main character's life. So that was just like, it hurt my heart for them, and I was like, I just want things to be okay, but sometimes life is messy and it's not okay, and I ended up really liking it because ultimately we are okay. That's why the book's titled that, probably. Then we have Liesel and the Goblin King from Winter Song by S.J. Jones. Now this is only true for Winter Song because as of the first of this year, I read the second book, and man, they would be at a different spot on this list. Lower on this list if Shadow Song was factored in, but it's not, thankfully, so we can just talk about them in the first part and then this book. And in this book they have more of like a Hades Persephone dynamic, but it's not something that I really like a ton because this book is almost broken into like two parts, and in the first part they have a completely different dynamic than the second part, and he is just more like, his actions don't really make a ton of sense. Like, in all honesty, the actions of most of these characters in this series don't make sense. But his actions don't really make sense for then their, like, romantic relationship that forms. But when it does kind of form, I start to kind of like it. I start to kind of pull for it. It's kind of dark and twisty, you know, all those things that I like. But at the beginning, it's like, this doesn't, how did you think this action would get to this? It doesn't, and it sort of worked, and why? And I just don't really like that, which is why they're not higher on the list. But some of their angsty feelings were good once that it got to that part, but it just took a while to get to that part. It didn't really make sense along the way. But if you think that continues in the second book, spoiler for next year, it doesn't. Then we have Isabel and Rook from An Enchantment of Ravens. Now this surprised me that they're actually number 18 on this list, because in previous years they'd be farther down the list because I don't like them that much as a couple. They're just like, I like them more than these couples that are just meh. So they're just winning because the competition is not that great. And a lot of people loved this book, a lot of people didn't like this book, and I was in the like, it's good, it's okay, you know, like it's pretty good. So there were times that I really liked them as a couple and times that it just was like, why? But they had just enough to pull me in a little bit. And they're not like an OTP, they're not something that I was like, I clutch my chest because they give me all these feelings or anything like that, but it's one like, I pull for them a little more than the ones that are farther down on this list. I remember them, I remember their names when I was writing this list, you know, stuff like that. So it's sad that this is like, oh, you're in the top 20 because you weren't completely forgettable. But that's the year that 2017 was, apparently. Then we have Hava and Ahmad from The Golem and the Jinni by Helene Vecker. And these two aren't really like that canon of a couple, so I don't want you to go into this being like, oh my gosh, this is supposed to be like this big romance. It's not. Like, the majority of the book is not romantic at all. But they start to form a friendship, and then possibly a little bit more is like hinted at and stuff. And I just really liked that slow burn development, and the fact that there's these two people who are so different and are questioning if they even have any humanity because they're two like creatures technically. One's a golem, one's a Jinni. So they don't really know what it means to be human. They're coming to terms with like being in a new place that's not like they would have imagined before, and separated from like the culture that kind of made them. And then finding one another's kind of ports in that storm, and I really like that and that feeling and whatever. But it's not an overly romantic book, and their relationship or even a friendship isn't the primary focus of this book. It's a very, very small portion, but the parts that we do get I really liked, and were just very strong and just like a very slow burn kind of thing that I feel like was a good foundation for a relationship that I can imagine happening post this book. Then at number 16, we have Lilac and Tarver from These Broken Stars by Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner. I listened to this one on audiobook, and I think the reason I like this one is because people do talk about their dynamic as kind of being Titanic in space, so it's kind of Rose and Jack in space and their dynamic, and they kind of have to rely on each other to survive, but they're from like separate sides of the train tracks, if that's even like the saying. I think that is, I don't know. But they're definitely from two different walks of life, and they have two different understandings of things, but then they realize that they're more similar than they think, and I really like that. I like this sort of like they were attracted to one another, and then they didn't think they liked one another, and they have this like push and pull, and then they have to rely on one another, and they like, yeah. So I think this is a relationship that I would have liked a lot more a few years ago. I think when I was really into my like dystopian YA thing, even though this is not dystopian, it's sci-fi, but when I was more into like that, I feel like this rings a lot of those same kind of bells and feelings for me, but at this point I've just seen it a lot more, that it doesn't kind of pull at me the way that it used to, but it's still a dynamic that I like, and it's still something I liked seeing, and I still liked them overall. They made a really good team. Then for top 15, we're finally breaking into the ACOWAR couples, of which there are so many in so many ways. But again, I'm only talking about like at least semi-canon couples, so while there's some other ones that are kind of like lurking about, I'm really just talking about the ones that have kind of like a main focus. So right here, I am talking about Cassian and Nesta. Now, I expected to love Cassian and Nesta a lot more in this book than I did, and I do ultimately like their like push and pull, I hate you but I love you, I can't really help it, blah 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 kind of thing. And like there's a scene in here about having more time that really kind of at me a little bit, which is why they're at, you know, top 15. But it still wasn't as much as I was hoping for, as I was expecting, or that I would have wanted. And especially Nesta spends most of her time being like, I hate you, and not wanting to be near him. And it's just like, can we not be like this? Like, I know she's like this, but can we just not? Like, I'm getting tired of it, you know? I'm getting very bored of this very, like, I don't like you. You do. You obviously do. Like just stop. Like, I like the drawn out stuff in the back and forth, generally speaking, but with this, it's just like, all right, I've had enough. We all know you like each other. You know you like each other. Can we stop with this, like, no, I hate you. Like, you don't. Next we have Dimple and Rishi from When Dimple Met Rishi by Sanya Menon, and this was just a very cute contemporary story with a very cute contemporary couple. Initially I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about this because it feels very gimmicky. They are actually set up to be married by their parents because they are both Indian American and their parents want them to marry traditionally, and so he knows about the setup and she doesn't, and they end up meeting at this camp, and he knows and she doesn't, and it kind of backfires, and then they kind of have to start over from there. And so she's very resistant to it, and he's just like very pure and innocent and excited because he didn't know that she didn't know, and it's just like it's really cute, and they end up like forming a friendship, and then like feelings start happening. It's a YA contemporary, of course, you know, like, but it was just very cute and just the kind of tropes that I'm not used to seeing. Like, I'm not used to seeing arranged marriage tropes. I don't read a lot of like romance books, because apparently that's like a trope in a lot of romance and stuff, like adult romance and fan fiction and a lot of things that I just don't tend to go for those kinds of media in my like fan fiction or in my romance or whatever. But it was so cute, and it was just the one that like made me very happy. I'm just like, oh, all about them. Then some other contemporary loves. I have Eliza and Wallace from Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zapaya, and these two were another just cute couple. This is a book about fandom, and the main character Eliza writes a webcomic, and then Wallace writes fan fiction for that webcomic, but he doesn't know that she's the writer of that webcomic. And so when they meet, it's just kind of like off balance thing, because like she knows who he is, but he doesn't know who she is, and they are just very cute, nerdy little nerds, and they talk about like the fandom stuff that they love, and they have the kinds of conversations that I have with either my friends or like romantic partners or whatever about like internet culture and like fandom and stuff, and it's just really cute. And they also have, both of them have different mental health things going on, and they have very real conversations about that, and it's just a very cute but real story, especially if you're a fan of fandom type things. There was a couple things about mental health that I didn't love towards the end that was kind of depicted within their relationship, but overall, I really love this. I think they're very cute, and I definitely pulled for them throughout the story. Then we have Vasa and Marasco, I think is how you say the name, from The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. Now, I almost didn't add them because they're not technically a canon couple, but it's definitely hinted at that this is the foundation of them as more in the later books, and this is going to be a trilogy, and the second book is already out, and I've heard inklings from people that there is like more to that later. So this is the same kind of dynamic as like the dragon and Agnieszka from Uprooted, or like the characters from Deathless, who we'll talk about in a second, and like some of those kinds of couples. So they are sort of magical both in their own right, and he is an actual like folk tale, and they have the kind of dynamics of tropes that I like Death and the Maiden and stuff like that. They are definitely that kind of thing, and I like that. So while that wasn't explored a lot in this book, I think it's going to be explored a lot in more books, and there's a whole thing that kind of ties them together, and it's just something where I'm like, it's not there yet. It's like a 2% thing in this book, right? But I see it. I see the direction you're going, and I am on board. Now we have at number 11, not quite breaking into the top 10, is Jean and Isri from the second book in the Gentleman Bastard sequence, Red Seas Under Red Skies. Now they are technically a side couple because Jean is technically a side character. I feel like Locke is the protagonist of this series, but like he's almost a protagonist too, especially within this book. So I can go either way, but I really liked them, and I really liked their dynamic, and I really liked their kind of like back and forth banter, and I think they were a really solid match. And she is a lieutenant on a pirate ship, which just speaks to me. And Jean is just like a sweet bean who could also kill you, and I feel like she has a similar personality type, and they were just a really good team and a really good match, and I really enjoyed them. I wanted to see even more of them, honestly, because I just really liked it. And it was such a small part of the story, but I liked it. At number 10, we have Serene and Rayon from Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. Now, these two kind of took me by surprise as well because they are both sweet. They are both nice, genuine, good people. They're not anti-heroes. They're heroes. They're good people. And you know how I usually am. I usually don't love those types of characters, those types of relationships, but I really liked this. Now, these two are kept separate for reasons that you know at the beginning of the book, because Rayon has been turned into an Elantrian, so he has been thrown into Elantris, and she doesn't know that, and they were engaged to be married before she got there, but they had never met. It was like a long-distance political betrothal thing, but they had this bond, and they had this connection. They keep thinking about one another, not knowing that the other one is there, and like, it's a lot. And I really like it. And they have like, they're both good and pure and sweet beings, and they also had a little bit of the angst factor going on for me, and I really enjoyed that. And they're also, again, a really good team. Something that I really like with a lot of my ships. If it's not the angst, I like the really good teamwork, and if you have both, then oh man. But that's what I really like. So they made a solid, good team, and I deeply appreciate that. And I just liked how they didn't know one another really, but they like pined for one another and what could have been, and just like, I just really like them. Now, number 9 are Kelsey and Penn from The Invasion of the Tierling by Erica Johansson. Now, these two are a trope I really like, and this is the princess or the queen and the guard. Alright, I really like it. And they have a dynamic where I think he might love her a little more than she loves him, but she also loves him more than she realizes she does, and they depend on one another. They're also a good team, but there's also like a power dynamic thing going on. Obviously, she's royalty and he's her guard, but like that dynamic, man, gets me every time. So I really enjoyed that. Again, it's not a huge part of the story, but it's definitely a part of the story, and I pull for them a lot. I want them to end up like fully together, not just together out of like sort of convenience at times, I feel like is how she's looking at it, at least. But he looks at her with like stars in his eyes, and I just deeply appreciate that kind of dynamic. Now, number 8, and lower on this list than I thought they would be based on last year, was Kuru and Akiva from the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy by Laini Taylor. I read the first book in 2016, and then I finished the series in 2017. I really liked the angst they brought in this book, but then by the time I got to the finale, I just wasn't caring as much. I still really liked them, I still pulled for them, but the angst has sort of run out, and it was just kind of like, my love for them went down with each book, which really sucks, because in the first book I was just like, tear my heart out. The second book was like, still tear my heart out, but not as violently, and the third book was like, you don't need to tear my heart out at all. And in my opinion, it should ramp up, you know? I should feel more feelings, and I just didn't. But they're still in my top 10. I still have a lot of feelings about them. I like their, like, star-crossed lover thing going on, but I was expecting to love it so much more as the series continued, and it actually ended up fizzling out for me, which is so sad. And then we have the return of the host with Ian and Wanda from The Host by Stephanie Meyer. And this is the couple that I preferred within the story, and I just feel like they had less problems. There was still some stuff about like body ownership stuff, and there was a little bit of a dynamic with like, at one point he was mad at her, so he like yanked on her arm, and I didn't really like that. There's like that borderline abusive behavior, toxic masculinity that just happens in Stephanie Meyer's books a lot of the times. But overall, I really liked them. He saw her as a person when no one else did. He changed a lot about his personality, because in the beginning he was against her as well, along with his brother, and then just really changed his mind about a lot of things. And they have just a very sweet dynamic, and I just really enjoy the way that they like grew together and grew to really care about one another. I also think this is maybe impacted by the fact that I love the actor that plays him in the movie. I saw the movie before I read the book, so I was picturing the characters from the movie when I was reading the book, and I just really like that actor. He's just a very cute dude, and I like his mannerisms, and like, I just really like him. He's cute. He's got a cute face. So I think that also impacted it, because I was like, oh yeah, Ian, he's a cute guy. But overall, I just like them the most out of the couples in the book, and I just really like their dynamic. And again, a good, solid team, and trusted one another, and just like, my feelings. At number 6, we have Koshi and Mario, I think is how you say her name, from Deathless by Catherine M. Valente. Now, this is a book that I initially didn't rate very highly. I think I gave it like a 3.5 out of 5 stars or something, but it has stuck with me and sunk its little claws in me in a way that like I really still enjoy it, would recommend it, but it's just not a book for everybody. And this couple is not a couple for everybody. This couple is dark and twisty, man, in a dark, dark, twisty way. This is all about like Russian folklore and mythology, and this is a very Death and the Maiden, Hades Persephone type relationship. They're both kind of bad people, and it's who's the monster and who's the human kind of dynamic, and they do twisted bad things to one another. They do things to hurt one another. They can be semi-violent with one another, but at the same time it's like almost not that bad because they're both kind of not human, so can they really hurt what? There's a lot of stuff going on. So a lot of dynamics that some people might not like and might find like problematic, but it's supposed to be problematic and the narrative like shows that it's problematic. But it's a very interesting dynamic to read about, and a dynamic that I really like reading about. These kind of like mythical people and just like the damage that they're doing to one another, and like you would have to read the book to fully understand, but man, did they get me. And there's some like photo sets that pop up of them that I'm just like, oh man. So if you have ever had a ship where it's like a villain protagonist ship, and you kind of wish in an alternate reality that the protagonist would have embraced their darkness and their villainy and kind of go and be bad with the villain, if you've ever had that feeling with any ship, you know, I think of it a lot with like the Darkling and Alina, or possibly even Rey and Kylo Ren, you know? Like, even though I know, like, in canon at the time, depending on what ship we're talking about, but anyway, that's a whole different side story. I'm not gonna get into that right now. Even though, like, as the villain protagonist, that won't work and someone has to change whatever, and people probably aren't gonna go to the dark side, because the people that are the protagonists are just so pure in both of those instances. But if you ever wished, as I have obviously wished and thought about, especially related to Lina the Darkling, if you ever wished that the protagonist would go a little evil, go a little dark, that's what this is. And it's really good. I like it. It's dark and twisty and it's not for everybody, but it's for me. Top 5, man. Top 5. Number 5 is Reese and Farah from ACOWAR. Now, they, in another year, would have probably been lower on the list if I would have had more contenders, because I didn't love them as much as I'd loved them in previous books and previous years. Obviously, last year in 2016 is when I read ACOMAF and like loved them in that. And in this, I liked them, but I also feel like there were some missteps that happened with them, and I just didn't love their dynamic as much. And I didn't really care they're kind of codependent, because they've been codependent the entire time, but like there was just not enough attention paid to them in this book as there was in the previous book, so I didn't have the feelings as much. Like, I had forgotten by the time I got to this point and writing my list about how much I do ultimately really like them, but I think in other years they'd be farther down the list. But I still like them. I still like their sort of Hades Persephone vibes. I like their teamwork and working together, although they didn't do that as much in this book, and that's probably why I didn't like them as much. There was a lot of him just like doing the thing and her not using any of her powers that she's developed over the series, but whatever, what do I know? I'm not a writer. But still very, very high up there, and still, while I'll probably continue to read this series, even though I don't really want to with like the continuation, I don't want to, but they've wrapped me in, and here I am, bitter about it. Number 4 is another one that startles me that it's so high on this list, and again, in other years wouldn't maybe be so high. It would still be in my top 10, but maybe wouldn't be top 5. But ultimately, they are. They're number 4. And that is Tessa, Will, and Jem as an OT3 for number 4 slot. You guys know them. They're from The Infernal Devices by Cassandra Clare. And I have said before that I don't ship her with either guy. I ship them all together as a whole group of people in love, and it's all messy, and there's multiple lines in the story about that and how they just love each other so much that they're hurting one another and all this stuff, and I really like that, and I just really like them as an OT3 together. I love it. And I searched after in the tags for them, and I know there's people that are like, Team Jem, Team Will, blah, 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 I like them. Team all of them together. That's where I sit. Speaking of triads, this is the year of polyamorous ships for me. Number 3 is Cenite, Alabaster, and Enon from the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. These 3 wonderful, flawed human beings in love, I cannot. They, this is an actual, like, polyamorous couple in canon. They're all together, and I love it so much, and it hurts my heart how much I love them, and how much they all love each other, and, So Alabaster is a gay man, and Enon is a bisexual man, and then Cenite is, I believe, a heterosexual woman, but that's kind of how their triad works out. But even though Alabaster and Cenite are not attracted to one another in that way and whatever, like, they still have this love and connection. Like, it just, you guys don't understand how much I feel for them, and there is not nearly enough fan art for this series, for anything in the series. For romantic relationships, for imagery, for anything. I have looked and there's not enough. And what are y'all doing? Why are you sleeping on this? I want photo sets of my polyamorous OTP. Where is it? Where is it? But yeah, these guys gave me a lot of feelings, but I couldn't like sit there and just soak in those feelings because I didn't have fan art to go with it, which is a crime. And number 2 is Shizuka and Shefali from The Tiger's Daughter by Kate Arsenault Rivera. These 2. So these are 2 warrior women in love in this fantasy universe. It's kind of based on like Mongolian culture. And oh man, they have so many things that I really like. 1, they're both like incredibly stubborn. 2, they're women in love. 3, they're warrior women in love. 4, they have all this like fated stuff going on with them. So like there's stuff that happened when they're both born about them being fated. They're tied together. They fight for one another. They're kind of like a very us against the world type couple. And they're also like non-apologetic about them being in love. And just, there's a lot of things with them that I really love, and there's a lot that's going to happen in the second book that I am so here for already. And this whole story is told in, for the most part, there's a couple chapters that switch off of this, but for the most part it's mostly told in a kind of letter story form where one is telling the other one the story of their like love. I love it. I love them. They're so great. And not enough people have been talking about this book, and while there are some like issues that have been talked about in other reviews about this book, overall, it's 2 warrior women in love, okay? Y'all should read it. And my number 1 is one that I also mentioned last year. It is from a book that I read at the beginning of 2017, and that is Aduin and Iseult from Wind Witch. Now these 2, man, have been a part of my heart for some time now. But they kept the angst alive this year, because without them, we wouldn't have an angsty couple to talk about. And you know how I love my angst, and we just wouldn't really have that. There was hardly any of those in this list. It was nothing, it was empty, it was barren. So thank God. Thank you for saving me this year, Aduin and Iseult, because as I mentioned before, they are 2 angsty characters who are just angsty on their own and then angsty together. They both have some like dark magic going on, which is really great, and they have to kind of team up in this book a little bit, and they're reluctant about it, but it's great. And there's things that I want to say, but it would technically be a spoiler, so I can't. But oh man, how canon can you be, guys? There's things that were promised in the first book that like happened, and that whole theme just kind of continued. They had this bond, they don't really know, all this stuff. And this book actually has a scene, like the Pride and Prejudice scene with the hand from Pride and Prejudice 2005 with the hand. That happens in here. And it's based on that. The author tweeted about it while she was writing it, so I knew to look for it, and like, oh man. So, number 1, Aduin and Iseult, thank you for saving me this year. I am very disappointed in the rest of you. I'm not. There were still a lot of good ships on this list, but overall it was just not the shipping year that I usually have. I think 2017 is just one of those years where it was hard to enjoy things. You know, when you're drowning, it's really hard to enjoy things. But I already have very high hopes for 2018. I want there to be the high highs and the low lows. Like, I'm okay with having some ships that I hate. I just have to have the ships that I love and just have them not be so forgettable the whole year. So I have high hopes. I think it's going to be a good year. There's a lot of good books coming out. There's hopefully going to be some good angst. But I hope that was still enjoyable for you guys, even though so many of the ships just sat in a lame portion of the list this year. Wasn't as good as it could have been in previous years, but it's not my fault, man. It was 2017's fault. It was the curse of 2017. So comment down below, let me know some of your favorite ships from this year. And like I said, if you guys want me to do some of my favorite ships from other media, because that's what filled the void in my heart this year, then I will talk about that in my other channel. But comment down below and let me know if you want that. I want that. I'll probably still do it if you don't want that, but let me know if you want me to do that and I will prioritize that. So thank you all for watching and I'll see y'all guys soon. Bye.